We're making this beautiful fuchsia journaling bag, and it's compact, but it does hold a lot of supplies, and I'm making this in really bright, beautiful fabrics. I've pieced together some of my scraps, and what we need for this bag, the focal fabric is going to be 2 8 by 15 inch rectangles. One is for one side of the bag and one is for the other side of the bag. So I'm just going to take these two pieces, I'm just taking one at a time, and I'm going to layer it onto quilt batting, and then I'm going to layer it onto a piece for the inside of the bag, and you just want the inside fabric showing. So now we're going to go ahead and quilt this, and I've decided to just use those seam lines as my quilting guide, and I'm just putting this in my machine. I'm just going to do straight stitches, so nothing special. And I'm going to quilt this about every 1/2 inch. So I'm quilting this pretty heavily. I think it'll give it a really nice professional look. And when you quilt things, no matter what you do, it kind of changes the whole look of the fabric. And I really wanted to maximize that, so that's why I'm quilting it about every 1/2 inch. And I'm just using the seam lines and then also the edge of my foot. So if I make a line, then I'll just go from that a 1/2 inch over, which is basically my foot size. But you can quilt this however you want. So this finished bag is going to be about 11 inches long, 3.5 inches tall, and about 4.5 inches wide. So it's a nice size, but yet it's pretty compact. And we're going to use a 14-inch zipper, and it's going to zip like down the side. So all the pieces and all the dimensions are going to be in the description. And I'm going to walk you through each step of this process in detail. And anything that you miss, you can just rewind and go back and watch it. But I know for myself, once I finished one bag, then I really felt comfortable with this whole process. So I've chosen some purple thread, and what I did was use the same thread on top as I'm using in the bobbin. So my inside the bag fabric, I wanted to do some like a bright pop of color. So it's like that darker purple is on the inside of the bag. But I do think it's kind of fun to pick a fabric that would be a little bit unexpected when you open the bag. So the other pieces that you'll need on this project, you're going to need some 2-inch strips, and then we're going to do 2 smaller pieces for like zipper pulls that are 1 3/4 by 2.5. So you'd need 2 of those little rectangles. Then you would need 2 3.5 inch squares. Those are going to be the ends on our zippers. And so this is what this piece looks like when we're finished quilting. So doesn't take many pieces, and you can definitely use scraps like I'm doing. I'm just kind of pulling ones from maybe the same colors. That way everything works together. So now that we have this piece quilted, we're going to do the same thing on our second piece, but then we're going to trim it down to 8 by 15 inches. And those are going to be the 2 sides of the bag. So now we're going to take our 2-inch strips, 2-inch by 16-inch strips that are the outside fabric. So just whatever you want to show on the outside. And these are going to be next to the zipper. So I'm going to take those strips, I'm going to find the top of my rectangle, and then I'm just going to flip it to the inside fabric, and we're going to add it to that. So my strip, I can't quite tell what's the right side, what's the wrong side. Honestly, it probably doesn't matter, but I'm just going to choose and put right sides together. So I'm just going to be adding this strip by sewing a 1/4 inch, and all our seams here are a 1/4 inch, unless I tell you something different. But we're just going to add this strip and then bring it around to the front, and then we're going to sew that strip on again. And that just gives us a nice edge for this bag, and this will sit right next to our zipper. So it's a nice time to, just take a fabric that you're going to be seeing a lot, like a focal fabric. So this is our 2 different quilting pieces, one for each side of the bag, and we have 1 binding strip on the top of each piece. So now we're going to work on these little zipper pulls here. So I'm just going to take these pieces and I'm just going to iron in so that they meet in the center, but we're going to keep that 2.5 inch length. So you want to be folding it in, but keeping that 2.5 inch length the same. And then we're just going to sew down. So I'm showing you a little bit. This is called chain piecing. This is what we do in quilting. So if you have a lot of pieces to sew, you just kind of push them in one right after the other. And it's a quicker way of sewing. So that's how we're going to do these little tabs. And now these are done. We'll set those aside and we'll use those later. And then we're going to take our zipper and we're going to add those 3.5 inch squares to the end of our zipper. So I have the 3.5 inch square facing up and I have it like offset a little bit. I'm positioning it about 1/4 inch from the edge of that zipper, like the end of the zipper or wherever you want to sew. And then you saw the first edge I folded in a little bit, and then the top I just pushed over there. And now we're going to sew that 1/4 inch seam. But you want your square facing up and your zipper facing down when you do this. And then we're just going to take a little seam here, and then we're going to pull that. It's like almost like a fabric tube, and then we're going to pull that back and then press that really good so that that shape stays. And you can trim that little yucky edge off there. But once we pull this back, all we've done is basically extend the zipper with some fabric. And this will show, so whatever fabric you choose, you do want it to be something that will look good on the outside of your bag. Just a teeny bit will be showing on this project. So we're going to do the same thing to the other side of that zipper. You just want to make sure you put that pull back a little bit so you don't have any problem sewing with that. So now what we're going to do, we're taking that one side of the bag and we're taking that binding edge that we did, that binding strip on the edge. We're going to just top stitch that to the zipper, but you want to make sure the zipper is centered. So you're going to have about 1/2 inch of that tube fabric that we added on each end. And like I said, you just want it to be centered. The measurements aren't so important, but we just do want it so that equal parts are hanging over the end. And then we're gonna, so this is the first side of the bag, doesn't matter which one you pick. And then, so we have the outside of the bag showing and the nice side of the zipper showing. And we'll do the same thing when we add our second side here. We're still gonna have the nice side showing, the outside showing, and the nice side of our zipper. So we're just gonna top stitch this second side as well. And again, we just want that binding strip is what we're sewing onto our zipper. So I pulled the zipper pull out of the way just to make sure that doesn't interfere with sewing. So now we have both sides of the bag on. And now we're just going to make sure that we open this zipper up. And then we're going to fold it towards the inside of the bag so that you're seeing the inside of the bag fabric. But we want to make sure the zipper's open because we're going to start closing up our bag. And so if you have the zipper open, then we'll be able to turn it inside out. So now we're going to sew that bottom seam. And you want to take your 2 inch by 16 inch strip for the inside fabric. And that's what we're going to do here. So in this case, I'm matching that strip, but honestly, a lot of times I will do like a contrasting fabric. So use whatever you have. Don't feel like it has to match 100%. So we're just going to put this strip on, and you can pick either side. It doesn't matter which side you choose. But we're going to add this strip just like we did before as a binding strip. And then we'll bring it around to the other side and then re-sew that. And that closes up our bottom seam. So we're just going to go ahead and sew down this whole seam. And then basically we'll have this bag closed up except for those sides. So if you love content like this, I would love to have you like this video or comment or subscribe. And if you do want to comment, I would love to hear what kind of fabric that you would love to sew into bags or fabrics that you're finding right now. That's something that I've been looking for. Like I always look for floral fabrics, but I've been kind of on the hunt for some nice pink florals. But I would love to hear what kinds of things that you like to sew with and what you're looking for right now. All right, so we're just going to trim those ends off of that strip. And then we're just going to reposition this bag. Now notice we left that long tail on our zipper. We're going to leave it like that for a few more minutes. So we're just repositioning this, and this is why, so that you have that bottom seam we just sewed, and you want to center that on that zipper tail. So you can see we've kind of repositioned the bag a little bit. And then now we are going to add our little zipper tab in here. And you just want the nice side showing, and you want to fold it so that those raw edges meet the raw edges of the side here. And we're going to make sure that that tab is centered. So that's a big deal. That's something that can easily kind of migrate away from the center. So you just want to make sure you have that nice and centered, and you can even pin it instead of clip it, but whatever works. And then I would encourage you to sew the seam and then just quick peek, peek at it. So turn it inside out a little bit and just see if that tab is nice. So typically it's totally fine, but just so you realize that if there's something that goes wrong, it will probably be that the tab moves a little bit. So you just want to make sure you're pulling those edges out, and I'm just going to clip this whole thing, and then I'm going to sew the end shut. And we'll do this same process on both sides of the bag. And then your little zipper pulls will be in there. And that really is a nice element to add. Of course, you could leave that off. You could use ribbon. You could use different things. But it is a cute little element, so it's kind of nice to have that. So once you have both these sides sewn shut like this, we're going to measure out 1.5 inch squares on each corner and cut those out, and I'm just cutting them out with scissors. But you do want to be as precise as you can be when you're measuring out this 1.5 inch square, because the more precise you are at this step, the more that your bag sits nice and square and straight. This is what gives us our nice box corners here. So I'm just going to draw this on all 4 corners, and then we're going to cut all 4 corners out. So once we have that step finished, we're going to go back and add binding strips to those edges. So they're like small little strips there. So whatever you have, you just want to go ahead and add the binding strips to that edge. And in this project, our zipper is coming to within about 1/2 inch of where we're sewing. So you just want to make sure that you're doing a 1/4 inch seam. You don't want to do some huge seam. You might accidentally hit that zipper. So now we're taking those box edges and we're just going to pop them up like this and go ahead and clip those corners. And then we're going to use a little binding strip to sew across each of these 4 corners. And this is our last step. So I'm going to make sure that I have at least 1 inch or 1.25 inches of these 2-inch strips that are hanging over the edge. And we'll just sew this down like the normal, like all the other ones we've been doing. And it's only about a 2-inch seam here, so this doesn't take very long. And we just sew the strip on, and then now I'm showing you how to fold in those corners. So on the other binding strips we've done, we haven't folded in the corners, but since this is our last set of binding strips and they cross over all the other seams, we just want to make sure we fold in these edges before we fold in the top here. And that way everything inside the bag is perfectly finished off. So if you want to make these bags to sell or you want to make these for gifts, they're totally finished off on the inside. It really looks really nice and really professional. But all these little binding strips, they're the 2-inch strips, and like I said, all these will be in the description. But you can definitely use contrasting fabric. You can use all different fabrics, whatever you want to do. Usually everything that you do on the inside of the bag looks really nice and just gives it a nice fun element to it. So now we have all of these 4 corners done, and I'm just going to make sure I pop all this out. We're putting the bag inside out, and I just want to make sure I push these corners out. But since we've done these binding strips on the inside, the bag sits really nicely. inch, and this is a great size. So here I just added a little like some dangles on the zipper, and you can see how our zipper comes all the way down to the side. You can see that little zipper pull or the zipper tab there, and we'll be able to fit a lot of things in this bag. So I hope you enjoyed this project. I hope you work on something like this. Maybe you could start putting your scraps in a bag and collecting things to make a project like this. And thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you subscribe, and I will put out more of these videos. So thank you so much.